So you've probably heard that the installation of Windows 11 is a bit atypical, and a lot of it surrounds the hardware requirements. And to be quite specific, it's that TPM chip. We're going to be installing Windows 11 into a virtual machine. Specifically, it's going to be VMware Workstation 16. You may have found this video because you might have ran into this exact error message that may have popped up on your screen, and you may be thinking, "Well, geez, how do you install this?" Well, that TPM or Trusted Platform Module chip, it is required to install, but as you'll find out, the outcome of at the end of this is you'll be able to use Windows 11 just the way that you've used all of your previous virtual machines. Some of the shortcomings of an encrypted virtual machine is the compression ratio when you go to compress something. So you make a template, you want to zip it up, maybe put it out in the cloud to either share, or you want to zip it up to back it up onto some other cheaper media. But if you've got a 4 gig VM and it's encrypted, when you compress it, it's going to be exactly 4 gig or slightly more. Whereas if it's not encrypted, you might be able to go from 4 gig to 3 gig. So that's one of the benefits we're going to be looking to get back. When you encrypt a VM, you can only make full clones. You can't make a linked clone to save disk space. It doesn't work. And then one of the other things, if you're working in academia and it's not a confidential VM, it's just for labs, testing, you have to continuously enter your decryption password every time you want to open that VM. And obviously the performance penalties you might incur with encryption. Today everybody has hardware accelerated encryption built right into your Intel CPU. So, the performance penalty of that's probably minimal. But, you still may squeak a little bit of extra performance out of having a fully decrypted VM. So these are the first things that we're going to do. I'm literally starting from scratch. There's no VM. Make certain that you've downloaded the appropriate VM that you're going to require. So the one that we're going to be using is the Windows 11 Education. Windows 11 Education is identical to Windows 11 Pro. It's important that you use Education because you're going to be needing to join this to Windows Active Directory. Can't do that with Home. We're also going to be using it as a client to manage any of the Windows core systems. So we need the snap-ins to DNS, DHCP, Hyper-V, etc. So make certain you're using the Education. Whether you grab Education or Education with an N, it really doesn't matter. I grabbed the one without an N, but the N just means that it doesn't come with multimedia. We're doing server work, so we don't really need multimedia. Also, when you download these, you'll be able to get a CD key as well. So when I go through this installation, if you're building a template to share, do not put your CD key in. If you're making a template not to share, which if you're in one of my classes, I'd recommend making one that you do have your CD key and just don't share it. That way it's fully activated and you can clone it as much as you like. So behind that window, we have VMware Workstation. So here I'm just going through the wizard to create a new VM. So nothing too atypical about this part. Install the operating system later. Now the version of Windows, the closest thing you're going to get, at least at this point in recording, is Windows 10 and later. Gonna give it a name. In this case, I'm just gonna call this tutorial 11. Pick a location you're gonna be able to find easily. UEFI will be fine for purposes of this video. I'm going to leave it as 2 cores. If I increase it too much, it's going to garble my audio. This part here, this is totally up to your discretion. I'm just going to increase this because I do have a reasonable amount of memory. And also want the installation to chip along at a decent rate. Here, we will be disconnecting the networking at some point, but currently we can just leave it as NAT. I'll show you how to just easily unplug the cable. Paravirtual SCSI is the fastest. And if you have it available, you can just leave it as NVMe. If you don't, you just select the default as the SCSI. This is up to you. I usually like the one where you split, makes defragmentation easier, and also when you need to move this virtual machine onto FAT32, you're going to have less of a headache if they're smaller disks. Alright, once that's loaded, just take a look at what you think you may or may not need. If this was a server, I absolutely would positively yank out the sound card, but I mean, this isn't. I mean, there may be some feedback that might be useful, so I'm going to leave that in there, but definitely don't need a printer. I can't imagine needing USB, so I'm just going to yank that out as well. We do need a CD-ROM. We're actually going to be putting a CD in the drive very shortly. So at this point, if you're on the screen, select the ISO and navigate to the one that you have. So the one that we're going to be using for this is the one that says Consumer Editions. That'll be our education version. Alright, now you probably, if you just found this video through YouTube, you might have did exactly this. And if you did, you would get that error message that I had in the slide deck. So to do this, we're going to need to add the TPM chip. Now I'm going to intentionally skip a step just to sort of show that this is what we need to install, the Trusted Platform module. But you'll see that it requires both the UEFI firmware, which we did select, and that it has to be encrypted. So to encrypt, you'll find it under the Options tab. And Access Control, Encrypt. It doesn't have to be a fairly complex password because we're actually going to be decrypting this virtual machine later. So I'm just going to pick a pretty basic one, make certain that you can easily retype it. Now that it's encrypted, we should now be able to add the TPM chip. This TPM chip is kind of like a virtual TPM chip. So on your computer, you physically have a TPM chip that can't be modified. I mean, that's what they call it, trusted. Whereas in VMware Workstation, they emulate a TPM chip. But if you didn't encrypt the VM, the TPM chip would be pretty useless because, well, you could just look at the keys. So that's why it's important to encrypt it first. Alright, now if you were to take a look at the VMX file before encrypting, it's a text file. Now that we've encrypted it, you can still open it with a text editor, but it's all encrypted, so it's all base 64 encoded. So now we should be good to hit the play button and get this rolling. Click anywhere in there. I'm just going to hit spacebar. Yeah, just be kind of quick like a button here, it won't boot. So the rest of this is kind of business as usual. Alright, so you should have had the key from that Azure DevTools. Again, if you have the key and you enter it, don't share this VM. Keep it to yourself. If you're making a template to share, then I don't have a product key. So I'm just going to pause this, enter my product key, and then hit next. Alright, so you're going to get the usual end user license agreement. Custom. Next. Alright, so is that out-of-the-box experience? You could just select the United States. I mean, I'm just going to go and select Canada though, just for thoroughness here. So, where we're taking classes. Now, I did try once just hitting C and it didn't do anything. Yeah. They literally want you to scroll through all of the countries. There's no skipping through it. So if you got something similar to what I did, which this is the first time I've actually got this error, I can't imagine that it's much. It says the out-of-box experience keyboard, OOB keyboard. I mean, at most, it's going, you selected Canada. I'm not selecting any sort of French accents on your keyboard, although I'm positive I selected Canada. The last couple times I did this demo. It's just now that I'm live, it decides to throw this error. For here, I'm not even going to do a try again. I mean, I was able to enter the product key, so it means my keyboard's fine. So I'm actually just going to click skip. Alright, so here is the part where we normally are able to figure out how to convince the installer we want a local account. When Microsoft, they try really, really, really hard to make you use a Microsoft account. And let's take a look here. So this is actually, oh, there we go, it did switch. So we just did this part, the part that it absolutely requires a TPM chip. There's just no getting around it. But this is the part where we're at right now. It's not so business as usual, because we used to be able to easily, hit cancel on it, and then we could make a local account. Well, Microsoft's getting really, really, really pushy, and I'm going to show this. I currently have an internet connection, and just like the experience to try and get out of it is not so easy peasy. I mean, it is once you realize the trick, but I mean, here, so you get through here, and you're like, well, I don't have a security key. What are my sign-in options? Go back. So try sign-in options. And what do you get? Well, it's not, we don't have Active Directory at the moment, so you're not going to domain join. No security key. So try back. And then have really the last option you got is this here. See where this takes you. Brings you right back here. So really the absolute only thing you can do is to unplug the Ethernet. So if this is your first time using a, virtual machine. Each one's a little bit different. So this particular one is VMware Workstation, so the Control Alt on the left side of your keyboard, press those concurrently at the same time. So press and hold Control Alt at the same time and just tap the two simultaneously, and it'll release your mouse. So before I do that, you'll see that this mouse is trapped inside this VM here. So just tap Control Alt, and it'll free your mouse. And now you can see I can freely move outside. If you're using something different, like Oracle VirtualBox, it'll be something else. Alright, find the Ethernet. So that's the CD-ROM. And this is the network. And this network is claiming there's an X, but I'm pretty sure it's lying like a rug. So we want to select disconnect. And now it truly is disconnected. We can actually triple verify that by clicking on VM, going settings, and you can also disconnect it from here as well. Select network, and you'll see now connected is disconnected now. So we've basically just taken the Ethernet cable and we pulled the cable. The card is still present. We just reached around to the computer and just went click and unplugged the Ethernet cable. Now, when you're at this stage, if you click the back button, this thing here, it's now trying to talk to Microsoft and realizes, well, you're installing this without an internet connection, so I can't make a Microsoft account and I can't join your Microsoft account. So it finally gives up and lets you proceed. For here, if you're in my class, when it says enter your name, we need some personalization. The name here is just going to be your first name. Here, again, if this is a production machine, obviously you're going to use a password. For the purposes of our class, this is, again, non-confidential, non-production. I'm just going to leave a blank password. And if I do that, it should auto-log in. And then you have a whole bunch of options here. These are completely up to you. Like, if you're in my class, just pick whatever you want. I mean, this is just a whole bunch of mandatory clicks. Do whatever you so wish. I mean, I don't have anything confidential, so take whatever telemetry you want there, Microsoft. Sure. Alright, that should log you in, and once you're in, you'll see again, we're still don't have VMware tools, we're still kind of locked in here at the moment. It's going to take a little while for this to start up here. Usually, when you want to install VMware tools, click on here, and then install VMware tools. You may or may not have that there. For some, it might be grayed out. The last couple demos I did, this was grayed out. If it is grayed out for you, don't sweat it. You can still install VMware tools. So the old way that you can do, VM, click here, and it'll just mount the ISO. If, however, you've got to this stage and it's grayed out, then don't be like, I can't do it. We'll be installing that together here, but there's a location where the ISOs are. This thing is still starting. Alright, well, I wanted to move along here. I'm not certain what Windows is doing. I'm going to see if it will let me shut this thing down. Because the next stage that we're going to is we want to restore this this virtual machine to the normal functionality that you expect. So a machine that doesn't have a TPM chip that's not encrypted. So I'm going to try to shut this thing down. There we are. Shut down. So you might get this warning here. It's just telling us that the VMware tools isn't installed yet. That's fine. I'm just going to click OK. We will be installing it. Alright, with this here, pull up the hardware profile again. You can just double click on any of these, or you can go VM settings. It's totally up to you. It brings you the exact same page. So next we need to, we're just going to remove that TPM chip. So say bye-bye to the TPM chip. And then under access control, oh, the TPM chip still exists here, so click save. Then go back. The TPM chip's gone. Access control, remove encryption, and just enter your password. Alright, so the encryption should be removed now. So this is now just a regular VM that you've been experiencing all the way from like Windows 7, 10, etc. You can make linked clones, all of the bits that you're used to. You should now be able to quite easily do the same. Again, just a reminder for VMware tools. We will be doing that in just a moment. So now that it's been decrypted and we've removed that TPM chip, for those of you that didn't get to this video because you're a student of mine, maybe you were wanting to install Windows 11 on a machine that didn't have TPM 2.0, which is a requirement, but it you have a TPM chip, but it's not the 2. And you're like, well, I'd still like to install it. Well, I'm pretty sure that once you've removed the TPM chip and you've decrypted it and you've fully installed it, that you probably could now export the Workstation VM and import it into a different hypervisor. So whether that be Oracle VirtualBox, KVM, Zen, Hyper-V, whatever, it probably will work. I'd be interested to know. I haven't tested it, but I can't see any foreseeable reason why, because they say that if you take a machine and we were to image it and then deploy it, so make a gold image and deploy it, that you don't need the TPM 2.0. So if you were wanting to install Windows 11 on physical hardware, so you have a laptop or a desktop, but again, it didn't have TPM 2.0, but it met all the other requirements, you probably now could take this VM that you made in VirtualBox, or sorry, the VMware Workstation rather, boot on another type of media that takes a backup of it, and deploy that backup on your other machine, and it probably should work. I can't see any reason why it wouldn't. I would be quite interested to know what those results are. So in the comments section, let me know. Alright, so it should be fully booted. Again, I can't get out of the edges here, 'cause the VMware tools isn't yet installed here. I'm going to just release the mouse. And again, I have the option here. If you have that option, just go ahead and select it. If you don't, though, I'm going to go through that option because this is, make certain that everybody has an equal opportunity to install it. So here, if you're on a Linux host, which is what I am, my images are going to be under user lib VMware ISO images. If you're on a Windows host, you'll find them in the 32-bit portion of your program files. So go Program Files, x86, VMware, and then VMware Workstation, and you'll find a bunch of ISOs there. So I'm going to go to this location. If you're on Windows, you'll need to point yourself to this location. So this is for people that it was grayed out. So we already have a CD in the drive. We just need to switch to a different location. So this is the location for me. I should have something that says ISO images. There we are. There's just so many, it was hard to find. And then these are the different VMware tools for the various different types of guests that you could possibly have. So it's not Linux, it's not NetWare, it's not Solaris, and it's not any of the older versions of Windows. It's not before Windows 2000 or Vista. So what you need is just the one that says windows.iso. So if you're looking through your program files, VMware Workstation, yours is going to have the identical ISOs. You want windows.iso. That's just going to put the CD in the drive. And Windows may recognize that you put the CD in the drive. There we go. Autoplay came up. If it didn't, when you click on the File Explorer, you'll see it on the left-hand side. I've already pulled up the File Explorer, so I'm just going to go through the File Explorer. And then click on Setup. That's the UAC prompt. Now, typical, we'd be able to just use this with VMware Workstation. You might end up using this same virtual machine later on with ESXi. So I'm just going to click on the complete, just in case you happen to keep this VM around and you happen to be really happy with it. And you want to throw it in ESXi. This will give you all of the VMware tools that you need. All right, once it's complete, just hit finish and say yes to restarting the machine. And once it's booted, if you click inside, you'll see now our mouse is able to traverse both in the guest and then going back to our host quite easily now. It should also enable things like copy and paste, and it's that paravirtualized SCSI should now be enabled, so our disk read-writes should take less CPU and have higher throughput. So the VM should be mostly ready to roll. There's a few things that we're going to be changing. So we did unplug the Ethernet cable, so you can plug the Ethernet cable back in. So find the network adapter NAT, and actually looks, the option was to connect it to startup, so it's probably there. We can verify it. Just go to settings. Yeah, it's connected. So what it's going to now start to do is do Windows updates. So if this is a production VM and you're going to be using this for legitimate purposes, don't disable Windows updates. If you happen to be using it for academia, I mean, it's a colossal waste of disk space, disk I/O. If you happen to be tethering on your laptop and you're doing some work on your VMs, while it's going to start to do updates on your cellular network, well, there goes your cell bill. So if it's for testing, I would suggest disabling it. So I'm going to do that before we make a template, especially if you're in my class. I would probably turn it off because it's just going to waste a lot of resources. So we're going to be doing that with group policies. Well, let's just go ahead and do it. So the breadcrumbs here, going across from the group policy to the policy we're going to change. If you need this for your notes, I'll be putting the slide deck in the description of the video, so you can reference that if you need it. So click on the brand spanking new start button and just type in the word group. And it should come up with edit group policy. And then going across, we want the administrative template. Actually, it's computer configuration rather. Yeah, computer configuration. Windows components. I'm positive I'm missing something. It's actually administrative templates and then having a mouse issue here. Windows components. Alright, so I'll update the slide deck, but yeah, administrative templates, Windows components, and then Windows update. So you want this one here, configure automatic updates, just double click it, switch it to disable. That needs to be applied. So if you got screen resolution like that I do, just kind of move it up a bit if you need to. And now it says disabled. So now you shouldn't be wasting any sort of resources that aren't really necessary to spin through. So these last steps are, if you happen to be a student of mine, if you're just stumbling across this video because you want to install Windows 11 on a virtual machine, then the rest of these are completely optional. But if you're in one of the classes, we need you to personalize these. So these are just some suggestive ones. I mean, if you're in my class, stick to these. If you're some other one, pick to whatever that professor is suggesting. I'm going to walk through these though. So going back to the start button here. And here we have the rename. So just give it a name. So it'd be Windows 11. And then your first initial, and then your last name. It'll ask you to restart. Just go ahead and restart it. Alright, so the computer name has your last name, and then the username has your first name. So all your bases are covered. When we launch a terminal, we should now see both of your full first name and obviously the initial again, and then your last name. So let's go drop to the command prompt here. So you can see at the prompt it's got the username, the Steve, and then when you take a screenshot you'd have to echo the computer name. Some screenshots require you to echo both the time and the computer name. Now the other instructions that do exist there, so I've gone over a couple of these other ones. So when we created this, we actually already were prompted to choose a user. That user actually does have administrative privileges. We've already done a few things that
require the UAC prompt, so that's a definite. But for number two, uh, if we were to say must be installing server 2022, the first user that's created, you don't aren't able to change the name. It's the built-in administrator account, and then once you've installed it, then you have to load the MMC snap in and add that name. So whether we're using Windows 11 or Server 2022, you should have a user with your first name and make it an administrator. With Windows 11, if you didn't set a password and it's the only user, and that's a single user without a password, it'll automatically log in. So that's already set up. As you go through your course, you may have to set a password at some point, but I mean, for the purpose of the template, I just wouldn't put a password. If you wanted your Server 2022 to auto login, you actually have to go through the registry and add it. Then once you've done that, though, it will auto log in. The last part, though, if you are coming to this from one of those programs listed, probably what linked you to this video will have the required files that you'll need to copy into the virtual machine before you create a template. Because if you don't, you'll have to keep grabbing those files every time you need them. That's really to save you some time in the future. So these are the last steps here. So just go to the VM here. So once you're all said and done, let's just turn this thing off. Alright, so it is now shut down. We've already decrypted it. So before we go to compress this and make it into a template, I would probably defragment it here. So that's already finished. Hit the compact. Yeah, I doubt that made much of a difference. Current size 11.5 gig. Go back, it's probably the same. Sometimes though that's not the case. Okay, we shaved off a teeny tiny bit. So back under here, one of these has a template option. This will take a second to find. Actually, just going to pause to save you some time while I poke. So it turns out it was right in front of my face. It is under Advanced. It's this one little checkbox right here. Enable template mode to be used for cloning. Click that little checkbox. And there we are. You can clone straight from your external. You can also keep this on the computer if you want to make a linked clone. But it is fully decrypted. So we can now use the VM and clone. And you can now make linked clones. Oh, actually. Well, that's my mistake. I thought if you made it into a template, you could clone a template. Clearly you can't. I'm going to check something. I'm going to pause this. Alright, so I just read the error message. I forgot to make a snapshot. So let's take it out of template mode for a moment. VM, snapshot, take snapshot, space, install, space suffice. And now we can go ahead and make it a template again. Manage clone. There we go. base install. And you could make it a linked clone, so then the new virtual machine is just going to consist of the deltas, or the changes that are there. It can save some disk space, but I mean, if you are keeping, like, if you're doing very, very little, a linked clone is fantastic. If you start to, like, install even some small software, it balloons like quick. Especially if you didn't disable Windows updates, linked clone ain't gonna save you anything. It could cost you more. But if you have done all that, especially if you've disconnected it from the internet and you really are not installing any additional software, you're just changing some configuration, linked clone can save you a lot. If that's not the case, though, a full clone is probably going to be your better option. So I'm just going to do that here just to show what it would look like. Just going to find a location to put this thing. So it's the clone of the tutorial. There we are. It's cloning. I'm just going to pause because it'll take a minute. Alright, should be done any second now. Alright, so we have a clone of the tutorial. You make a clone of a clone. This time I'm going to make a linked clone. Just to sort of prove that you can now do this. And this should be instantaneous. There you go. Linked clone. So the only disk space this is going to take is whatever changes you make. But if you keep it to a bare minimum, you'll save a lot of disk space. The next part, make certain that you have some kind of inexpensive disk. So you need like some cheap platter drive. I mean, Amazon just had 5 terabyte drives for about $100. I mean, that'll go a long way. So I'm just going to find the original one that we had. We were doing this one here, tutorial Windows 11. So if you've got some big drives, and that's 5 gig, you could back up 2 things. One, you could compress this thing. If you've got 7-zip, it'll be very comparable. Because what I'm about to actually use is 7-zip, but 7-zip for Linux. You'll have something, a little thing that says 7-zip, and then you can either make it a zip file or you can make it 7-zip. I have a preference to just stick with plain old zip, but go ahead and create it.
Josh.
And then here, I'm just going to actually mute my phone. Sorry about that. Alright, so this is compressing. Can't see because the screen is cropped, but there's that. And then here's the actual machine. If you've got enough disk space, backing up both is kind of handy. The reason being is you can actually just launch this VMX directly off the external and just clone straight from there. The zip file is handy in the sense that you can move things around also easily. It's up to you. You could zip it. You don't have to zip it as long as you're organized. I find one of the beauties of students zipping it, though, is that sometimes students will launch the wrong one and they'll corrupt what was their template. Now, we did select template, so you shouldn't be able to muck with it or change your template. So it should be okay. It should like squawk at you if you try to turn the thing on. With that, you should be okay. But I do suggest once you've completely done it, still make that zip, but then you can also copy the unzipped one as well, so you can actually launch it and just clone straight from there. But if you are doing a clone from the external, make sure it's a full clone, not a linked clone. Linked clone is if you've got it on the same, like you've got it stored locally. Alright, that was just my summary. I hope that was useful for you. If you find anything useful, or you'd like to ask some questions, if you're either at the college or you're not, feel free to use the comment section there and let me know what you think. Cheers.